It's Saturday, and welcome to another episode of PO Cubed, your chronological guide to Nintendo's handheld consoles. My name's DD Ash, and this week we're playing Shuugou Pinball Party, World Bowling, Heiankyo Alien, SolarStriker, and Wizards and Warriors X, The Fortress of Fear. Let's start the show.
You don't stop playing because you get old. But you could get old if you stop playing. Game Boy from Nintendo.
Shuugou Pinball Party, DMG-PPJ, developed and published by Jaleco. The first game released in the decade of the Game Boy, as no one calls it, is the Japanese exclusive pinball game Shuugou Pinball Party. The game was always going to have stiff competition from the excellent Revenge of the Gator, but sadly this one doesn't come close to that. There are two tables to choose from, and both are Spartan. The only targets are tabs to hit that let you spell out Jaleco to increase your multiplier. There's so little else to hold your attention. No rails or spinners, or much of anything, really. There are bonus screens, but you won't see them much. You progress up and down screens via warps in the corners of the table, but you'll find yourself dropping much more often than climbing. Once you get down to the bottom screen, moving up is very rare, as the game doesn't so much allow you to aim your shots as hit and hope. The lack of anything interesting is a real negative in a genre where there aren't many aspects you need to get right. But amazingly, this isn't Pinball Party's biggest problem. Possibly the most important thing to get right in a pinball game is the ball movement, the physics and collision detection. If that's solid, the rest of the game basically writes itself. It's all wrong here. Balls bounce in unexpected directions from the flippers, or sometimes not at all. Sometimes the ball passes straight through things. Discard any intuition you think you have from playing pinball in the past. It doesn't apply here. Most frustratingly, on the second table, the gutters seem to suck the ball in where you think it would just rebound off. It's as if the ball climbs the wall and commits suicide over the side. You get a tilt feature, but only on the first table, as far as I can tell, and it doesn't work anyway. An absolute car crash of programming that seemingly wasn't tested at all. There's an annoying part on one of the tables where you're trying to move to the higher screen while this girl in a top hat conjures up a dragon, which then vomits out a fire ghost, which, despite being a non-physical being, can be destroyed by your ball. Fail to do so though, and it sets fire to one of your flippers, causing it to disappear. Inevitably, you drop down a screen, leaving you befuddled at the cheap failure and lack of need for any sort of skill in what should essentially be a game of skill. There's a nice innovation where sometimes, I don't know what causes this, it just happened a couple of times, your flippers are replaced by a breakout style paddle, or two men with a trampoline in a Game & Watch Fireman kind of way. This adds a couple of minutes of interest to the game, but that's it, and it happens so quickly that there's a good chance you won't react in time, and that ball's over. Allegedly, there are cameos by some of the best-known Jaleco characters. I could identify Rit from the Rodland series, and nobody else. I think one of them is a pig, and I've no clue who the swimsuited and top-hatted magician lady is supposed to be. My gaming history education may not be up to scratch, but these other folk may well have been concocted and shoehorned into this game. Sorry, Jaleco, your mascots just aren't that famous. The music for Table 1 is alright, but it loops after 13 seconds. That's not an exaggeration, I timed it. Table 2 is even worse. It's party music, if the party was being hosted by Benny Hill. Occasionally, you get a Japanese exclusive that's good enough to make you wonder why other countries were deprived of it, and a small handful that were amazing, and I'll do my best to give them the credit and attention they deserve. Other times, however, you breathe a sigh of relief that we were spared certain games over here. Pinball Party is certainly no party. Hell, it's barely even pinball. World Bowling DMG-WB, developed by Athena and published by Romstar in North America and Athena in Japan. If you're grossed out by the idea of wearing recycled shoes that smell of Lysol, I know I am, then why not try World Bowling? There are two characters to choose from, a bowling shoe ugly boy or girl. The boy is right-handed while the girl is a lefty, which has a certain influence over the amount of spin that can be applied on either side. A second permanent modifier for the game allows you to specify the weight of the ball, which has some effect on the ball movement. None are more difficult than the other, it's just a case of learning what the slight differences are. Don't think that it's something intuitive or clever. The alterations are basically arbitrary. Once the game starts, you position your character along the line, select your control, which is left or right spin, and then power. The ball travels down the lane with a decent animation, scattering the pins in a reasonable assimilation of physics. Nothing fancy here, but serviceable. And that's basically the whole experience right there. No nachos, no beer, no high-fiving your teammates and whooping obnoxiously. I suppose you could do that if you wanted. Hell, you don't even get a choice of garish monogrammed shirts. The hit detection is not spot on by any stretch. You can miss entirely and get a hit. Sometimes the ball ghosts straight through the mark. The music is nice, but there's no bowling sounds, which seems like such an obvious oversight. The satisfying clatter of marble on wood when you hit a strike just isn't there. Not even an attempt to emulate it was made. Maybe they tried but couldn't do it, so just gave up, but it feels pretty lazy. Strangely, for what is essentially a sports game, apparently bowling is a sport. Who knew? You aren't playing against an opponent. Instead, each of the countries you visit have a qualifying score to beat. The scores you need to achieve are way too high. You need to hit strikes most of the time, with the first level requiring a 200 score in Japan, increasing to 250 by the time you get to England, represented by the Union Jack, but that's a separate grievance. For a guy who can't hit much past 100 in actual bowling, trying to do this on a Game Boy where your success or failure is determined by nothing but timing to audio cues is damn near impossible. There's little incentive to progress anyway. All the alleys look the same apart from the national flags on the wall. No saves, no passwords, no continues. You need to beat all 6 games in one shot. Don't worry about it though, beat the last country and you get these strange men with parasols who remark, "Congratulations, you are good player." Cool, thanks. So glad I just sat through all that. In my experience, the best thing about bowling is the social aspect of it. Going to the alley with your mates, getting drunk, and laughing at the guy with no coordination who keeps guttering that thing. Missing your turn because you got bored and started playing on Metal Slug in the corner. Writing a name on the screen as ass and poo. You know, all those things we actually used to go bowling for. There's none of that in World Bowling. And so really, is there any point? Heiankyo Alien DMG-HA, developed by Hyperware and published by Meldak. Really? Another one? The Game Boy wasn't even 9 months old, and there'd already been 3 Trap-em-up games. Well, okay, let's be fair, there were more cluttered categories by this point, but with a genre of such limited originality potential, did we really need this many? Originally released way back in 1979 for the PC 8000 by NEC, Heiankyo Alien was already pretty old by 1990. The name Heiankyo refers to the Heian period of historical Japan, and the story is that aliens have infested Kyoto. You can set traps for enemies, which they may stumble into, proceed to then bury them, and once all on the screen are gone, you move to the next stage. If you wait too long, they climb out, and can also be helped out by their kinsmen. If an enemy walks over a partially dug hole, it just fills in. There are 2 versions, old and new game. The old game is identical to the late 70s version, and is pretty hard. The holes take ages to dig. It's pretty sparse looking, as you might expect. and the AI seems pretty non-existent. The new game looks a bit better, and the accompanying music has a nice melody and pace. This version is a lot more friendly too, and new players should get the gist quickly enough. The AI seems better, but you move and dig faster, whereas the enemies dawdle along a bit more. There are 12 levels, 15 in the old version, which loop, with a more demanding time limit each time. Well, it's not really a time limit as such, but in Bubble Bobble style, if you wait too long, a ton more angry and fast aliens come at you, so don't hang about. The graphics in-game are fair to middling, nothing special. The death animation is pretty funny actually. I need to ask though, what the heck is that on the box art? It's truly disturbing and has to go down as some of the worst cover art ever. Heiankyo Alien is not as good as Boomer's Adventure in Asmic World, not as bad as the hideous Hyper Lode Runner. Occasionally I think to myself that I need to learn to appreciate the trap-em-up genre, but then I look at my shelf at the hundreds of other titles I could be playing, and after a few fleeting seconds it passes. SolarStriker DMG-SS, developed by Minakuchi Engineering and published by Nintendo. It is the year 2XXX, and Earth has been attacked by aliens from generic Planet X. Captain X of Intergalactic something has been tasked to pilot the new X fighter starship and fly to the heart of X's civilization to destroy the evil X once and for all. You know this story. It's second only to the Rescue the Damsel platform adventure in terms of overused game cliché. SolarStriker seems like a strange name, seeing as you're not actually attacking a star of any kind. Instead, you're tasked with flying to and infiltrating the enemy planet, penetrating the core and destroying the head computer. Play the game on a Game Boy Color or Advance, and it looks great. The colours are inverted so that the background is black, you know, like what space is, and it's quite effective. In 1990, with the dot matrix, this wouldn't have worked, and wisely they didn't try. Instead, you have a white, or green, background, with the detail of stars, ships and projectiles being darker. Everything is clear enough, and screen blur is kept to a minimum, as is the flicker. Sadly, it seems this was achieved at the expense of actually putting things on the screen. The backgrounds are 95% blank, leaving you battling the alien hordes in a void. There are almost 20 different enemies that come at you in SolarStriker, not counting bosses, which is quite impressive. And like lots of Nintendo games from this era, they have stupid names, including, but not limited to, Pincher, Batwing, Mac, and my favourite, Twerk. Also available are power-up icons, which allow you to upgrade your pew-pew lasers 3 times. If you get shot down, you only get degraded once, rather than right back to scratch. That's your lot though. No alternate or secondary weapons, no shields, nothing. One-hit KO. The AI attack in swarms, a lot of which can be dealt with by hanging out front and centre of the screen and holding fire. The aliens will just fly into your stream. You should have very little trouble getting to the bosses. The enemies aren't quick, and projectiles are few and far between. The first handful of bosses are a piece of cake too, although the bosses of stage 4 and 5 are pretty tricky. And the ending boss is painfully underwhelming, both in appearance and difficulty. It has one attack that will take you a couple of lives to figure out, but then you can defeat it in around 30 seconds. SolarStriker suffers from bland music, and 2, maybe 3 sound effects in the whole game. You're probably not going to want to play with headphones for this one. Overall, a decent, playable effort, but one that would be quickly overshadowed and never revisited. Like Super Mario Land, the game was safe. Certainly no boundaries were pushed here. But for a first foray into the shoot-'em-up genre, the game is not completely horrible. It's bang average.
Come on! Almost! Finally! Yeah!
Triumph is ours!
Squirrels!
But the battle of wizards and warriors continues with iron swords. The evil wizard Malkill will take the shape of the earth, wind, water, and fire. Farewell! The fate of the world is in your hands. Backed by a beast.
Live the saga of Iron Sword on your Nintendo Entertainment System from Acclaim.
Kuros?
Wizards and Warriors X, The Fortress of Fear, DMG-WW, developed by Rare and published by Acclaim. Thou hast discovered something most interesting. An early title, unreleased in Japan. Wizards and Warriors X is the first game in our library that was exclusively produced, developed, and released in Western areas. A sequel to Iron Sword, Wizards and Warriors 2 for the NES, you could be excused for wondering where chapters 4 through 9 are. Graphically, The Fortress of Fear is certainly reminiscent of its NES cousins. The protagonist Kuros is faithful, and the way the game looks is probably its biggest plus point. The graphics are quite nice for so early on, especially since this was the first real shot a Western developer had with the technology. However, the graphic style is also a detriment to the game. Trying to retain the sizes of the sprites from the NES trilogy on a proportionately smaller screen means everything is so close up that there's virtually no draw distance at all. Enemies and projectiles come upon you so quickly that until you've learnt the stage layouts, you'll be taking a lot of damage. Compare this to Castlevania or Super Mario Land, where characters were scaled down, sacrificing some of the look, but maintaining the all-important gameplay. As time went on, developers did find that sweet spot between playability and imagery, but it took a little while to get there. The Wizards and Warriors series was remarkable in part due to its omnidirectional exploration. Climbing up and down towers was just as prominent as were left-to-right sections. There's very little of that here. Levels progress horizontally with plenty of backtracking. The gameplay that we're used to in this series is largely replaced by an endurance course of projectiles painstakingly situated to damage you unless you're super quick. Respawning enemies, forced damage, and death traps. Throw into the equation a generous helping of awkward moving platforms and fall damage with massively overpowered enemies and bosses, and you've got one absolute tyrant of a game. Oh yeah, and there's no invulnerability period post-hit. You can lose all of your health before you've even been able to react to what's damaging you. No continues either, folks. It's a pretty harsh taskmaster. There are plenty of hidden passages that are largely found by jumping above the screen and walking over the top of the walls. And if you want to get anywhere, then this is quite necessary, as often it's the only way to get extra lives. Sometimes, though, you want to go back and carry on with the level, only for it to end because you pass through some secret exit. Some levels end just as abruptly, only for you to be told that the evil Malkiel awaits to vent his wrath upon thee. When I first saw that, I thought it was cool that the story progressed after each level, but no, you get the same text after each one. Never mind my hopes and dreams then. I can't stress enough how much I wanted this game to be great. I really did. It's just so short of the mark in so many areas. Thanks for listening to the Portable Power Podcast. If you want to support the show, the best way to do so is on Patreon at patreon.com/Portable Power Podcast. Or subscribe on the YouTube. We have daily uploads Monday to Friday, where you can watch me suck at the games as I talk about them. You can tweet me at POCubed or on any of the other socials you might expect. Thanks again and have a great weekend.